what I do as an attorney is actually just one piece of the pie, but a complete estate plan will include things that I do, which would include having a will, a last will and testament, but also having powers of attorney and medical documents and things like that in place to make sure that while you're alive, if you get sick, there's somebody who can make sure that your life is still moving, that someone's there to make decisions for you if necessary, and to maybe make some hard choices if you get really seriously ill.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Spotlight Houston, where we bring you the best of the people, places, and events in Houston. This week we talk about estate planning with attorney Monica Hennessey. Monica shares with us when to start planning, the types of decisions you need to make, and what happens if you don't have a will or a medical directive. This is episode 82, original air date of Sunday, April 7th, 2024. And now your host, Blanca Quezada.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight Houston. Have you ever stopped to think what's going to happen to your personal possessions, your money, whatever it is that you're just in love with? Probably not. Like me, I didn't until recently. I was talking to a friend who told me you just never know when or how you might take your last breath or die. What's going to happen to your things? Who do you want them to go to? And your finances, who do you want your dollar to go to when that happens? And yeah, I've had it in the back of my mind. It's like, well, I know who I should give this to or give that to. My car, whoever, can take it, that sort of stuff. But I think we all should stop and think about it, because I think that the person that gave me the advice was right. Is just something that's in the back of our minds, or it isn't even there, period. And just like a lot of other people, I think that for me, the issue is that I don't think of a younger person having to do that. It's always that person that's 80 years old doing his last will and whatever else he needs to do or she needs to do. And I think that I'm like part of that 100% of people that think the same way. And these people, they start thinking about their children, their grandchildren. What do they want to leave them when they're not here anymore? So I've asked Monica R. Hennessey, an estate planning attorney, to help us understand why wills and trusts are so important to have at any age. So, hi, Monica, and welcome to the show. So
Hi,
happy you're
Blanca.
here.
It's
So
good to
happy
be
you're here.
here. Thank you
Mm.
for having me.
Like a lot of people, I don't understand. I didn't understand what all this meant.
hmm
So, first of all, can you explain to us what estate planning is and why it's important?
Sure. First, I want to introduce myself. I am an attorney here in Texas, so I'm licensed by the state of Texas. And my main practice area is estate planning and probate. So, this is what I do every day and answer all these types of questions all the time. Estate planning is basically a holistic term for getting your affairs in order. And what I do as an attorney is actually just one piece of the pie, but a complete estate plan will include things that I do, which would include having a will, a last will and testament, but also having powers of attorney and medical documents and things like that in place to make sure that while you're alive, if you get sick, there's somebody who can make sure that your life is still moving, that someone's there to make decisions for you if necessary, and to maybe make some hard choices if you get really seriously ill. Besides the documents that you would go to an attorney like myself for, there are also other parts of estate planning that maybe we overlook a lot of the time. Things like making sure that your beneficiary designations are up to date on life insurance policies, on investment accounts, retirement accounts, and things like that, and including those types of assets in your plan, because just looking at one of them, like your will, or just looking at a power of attorney, or looking at your life insurance policy on its own, you're not really doing any of those different pieces, any services, if you're not considering them as like a whole plan, which is why we call it estate planning, because you want to think about each piece of the pie to make sure that it's a complete picture.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces and it can get overwhelming trying to understand the vocabulary and trying to understand what it actually all means and what is really the most important thing for us to do. And
Right.
a lot of times people will think about it and they might go to an office supply store and find packages of forms for will and trust and things like that.
Hmm.
Or they may write their own last will, maybe take it to a notary and or maybe not. But do you think that's a good idea?
Not really. I think most attorneys, especially in my area of practice, think that's a terrible idea. Mostly because, especially with like form wills or free wills that you get online and things like that, or especially if you try to do it yourself, you don't know what you don't know, which I think is the most important part. You don't know what law says unless you get into the weeds of it and do the research into what Texas law says, what makes a valid will, what do you have to do to make sure that the language is correct? Is there anything particular that you should have in your will to make sure that your executor is set up in the right way, that they have all the things that they need in order to do their job properly? Are you taking care of all of your property through your will? Is it signed in the right way? Because there is a particular way in which you need to sign a document in order to make it valid here in Texas. And if you don't know that stuff, you don't know how to put all that together to make sure that it'll do what it's supposed to be doing or what you're hoping it's going to do at the end
Right.
of your life. The other thing about, like, online forms and stuff, a lot of them will talk about, "Oh, yeah, we've got attorneys and things like that that prepare these documents," but you don't know those attorneys, you've never met them, they don't know your particular situation, they're drafted as generic documents, and you also don't know what state those attorneys could potentially be from. They may not be Texas attorneys, they may not have consulted with a Texas attorney or even read Texas law. So you don't know whether or not that online form is really going to do well for your particular situation and your family at the time of your death when it's most needed, right? And at the point where you've died and that will is going into the probate court, there's no fixing it. Basically, you wanna go and see a professional that's gonna be familiar with you. They're gonna be more familiar with your family members, your wishes. If there's anything special or particular about your family, like maybe you have a special needs family member or child, or if you have minor children, if you wanna use trusts and how you would use trusts, things like that. You wanna make sure that your documents are tailored to your situation, and going on to online to a form or going to Office Depot and getting one of those fill forms, you're not getting that personal experience, you're not getting a tailored document that's going to meet your specific needs, and while we all wanna say, "Oh, well, we're pretty simple, like, it should be pretty easy to take care of me.
Right.
I don't really need any particular guidance from attorney or anything like that." It may be a little more complicated than you think.
Exactly, exactly. Right now, you mentioned a couple of words that I don't understand. Like you mentioned an executor.
Okay.
What is exactly an executor?
So an executor is a person who's appointed through a document like a will. So the executor is the person who, when, and we can back up a little bit because the thing that happens to basically authenticate the will is you file it in the probate court. And so probate is a court process where a court accepts your will and they review it and they see whether or not it was signed in a way that's required by Texas law. So basically authenticating it. And then once they've decided that it's signed for appropriately, they will look in there and they'll see, okay, you've appointed Blanca to be your executor. So then they will determine whether or not Blanca is qualified to serve in that position because there are certain disqualifying things like if you owed the estate money or previously if you were a felon you couldn't serve, but the law has recently changed a little bit on that. uh, Basically deciding whether or not you're qualified. And then once you're qualified, the court will appoint that executor to serve as the personal representative of your estate. And their role is to step into your shoes and to finalize your last business. So they collect your assets, basically getting control of anything that's still out in your estate. They will reimburse any expenses like medical costs, funeral costs, any probate court costs, or any other expenses for the preservation of your property. And that could be to themselves or to any other family member, and pay any debt. We hope that debt dies with us at the end of our
Yes.
life, but depending on, usually in your contract, it doesn't die with you. It still exists after your death. And so one of the roles of an executor is to accept claims from potential creditors, determine if they're valid or reasonable and need to be paid. And then if they do determine them to be valid, then they do pay those debts to those creditors, and then ultimately distributing any remaining assets out to beneficiaries. So the executor has a pretty big role in an estate, and they essentially will act as you in your stead if you were finalizing your last business to take care of all your last wishes and whatnot. But they're doing it for you to make sure that all that stuff gets taken care of.
That's a huge responsibility. So why does it have to go to probate at all?
So not every estate has to go to probate. There are different reasons to need probate, but essentially, the reason that you would need probate is because you need somebody to give authority, the court essentially here, to you, the remaining family members, to either access somebody's property through the executor, so give them the authority to act. Because our estates, we all have estates. Well, even when we're alive, but you have your personal identity, you have your ability to open bank accounts and enter into contracts and act as yourself, right? Well, that estate still exists after your death, and there's nobody in control because you're gone, right?
Right.
So the court is giving your executor the authority to control that estate. Essentially, like a CEO comes into a company and controls that company. Well, it's a similar role for an executor. They're coming into your estate and controlling that estate where you would have normally been able to make decisions for yourself. You're gone now. Now there has to be a court authority that would give someone else the right to basically transact business on behalf of your estate.
Mhm.
And it could be because there's debt that needs to be paid. It could be because there's debt that needs to be paid back to you. Like somebody owed you monies and you were trying to collect on those monies, or you had a mortgage that somebody was paying on an owner finance mortgage and they were paying you and you died in the middle of that repayment. It could be because there's still property in your estate. For most people, it's going to be real estate like your house, it could be a bank account, it could be a vehicle, your personal property items, a business. There are a lot of different property items that don't usually have beneficiary designations that would transfer them automatically. So they would require probate because there's no authority that would give them the right to transfer to another person. So that's why you would need an executor appointed to do that. And any other business reason, it could be litigation or a lot of other things that could require an executor to need to be appointed in order to control your estate.
So pretty much it's an individualized will that needs to be done.
So probate is will happen with a will, but there is a probate procedure that can happen without a will. So when you don't have a will for yourself, Texas has a will for you. And for a lot of us, it's not necessarily the will that we really wanted. What happens is when you don't have a will that sets up who your beneficiaries are and your executor, what we have to do is establish who your heirs are based on the laws of Texas. And your heirs are essentially your family members that are determined by a descent and distribution law that determines who is your next of kin who would be entitled to your property. We
And
establish
sorry. So, and this is something that everybody should do, whether you're married or not, whether you have children or not. It's something that we should all do because, like I said, my friend told me that we never know. There could
yeah.
be an accident or you could get sick or
Yeah.
you could be disabled or something and you need somebody to take care of you.
Yeah. We don't have that crystal ball, right? That tells us
Exactly.
when we're going to die, what property we're going to own at the time of our death, what kind of business needs to be taken care of, and all those things that happen after our life is over. And so instead of kind of depending on, well, I'll wait until I'm old, or I'll get around to it when I get around to it, or
Exactly.
I'm never going to
Exactly.
die.
Think
Definitely, we're
about it.
all going
You
to
don't
die.
even think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you might as well go ahead and get it done. You don't have to be old. You don't have to be married. You don't have to have kids in order for you to start working on doing this. I think that we really should, as a society, get into the habit of doing these types of documents when we're younger, getting established as adults. This should be part of our normal adult habits that you become an adult, you start thinking about your estate planning documents. Do I have a will? Even though I don't have a lot now, it will maybe help my family in the future to get control of some assets that I may have, or to help them even get access to my phone if they want pictures in my phone. It could be as simple as that.
Right.
So
The
it's
other thing I
important.
think that's really interesting are the power of attorney forms that we need to fill out because, as I mentioned just a little while ago, we might get sick and we
Yeah,
might need help. We
yeah,
can become incapacitated or no
yeah.
telling, but you're going to need somebody to help you. So you need that medical power of attorney and also somebody to take care of your finances as well.
Yeah, and I find, especially if you're doing do-it-yourself forms or looking online for forms and stuff like that, this is the part of the estate plan that a lot of people overlook because many times are just focused on the will. We're focused on what happens after death, what happens to our property after we die. But
Exactly.
we live a lot longer these days. Medical science has improved, the length of our life has extended, how long we live with serious illnesses. We don't just die immediately when we get diagnosed with serious illnesses, which is great. But at the same time, that means that we're probably going to be in a longer period of time where we're going to need some help, especially with things like dementia and other cognitive illnesses will req that our body stays alive and even pretty healthy for a long time, but our mind is failing, and we really do need that help to make sure that our bills are paid and that if we need to go into a facility, we have somebody that can sign that contract for us, and that if we need someone to make medical decisions for us and decide what their care is going to be, there's somebody that they trust that can make that decision for them. So, having a financial power of attorney in place, a medical power of attorney in place, and a directed to physicians that we also know as a living will is really important, a piece of your estate plan, because your life is going to be a lot longer than what happens after your death. And you
Mhm.
want to make sure that there's going to be somebody there that can make sure that you're well taken care of. And I think it's especially important for those people who are single or maybe even estranged from their families, because the list of next of kin for things like medical decision making is really reduced down to your parents, your spouse, your children, those people that are normally really close to us. But when you don't have those, and maybe your best friend is the person that you want to be making those medical decisions, but they're not on that list,
Okay.
it's really a good idea for you to have medical documents in place so you can ensure that your best friend is making that medical decision for you because you trust that person. Or maybe your brother or your sister or your cousin Marie, who is a nurse, and you know that she knows what she's doing when she's making these types of decisions.
Yeah.
The other
So
thing,
we need to be basically we need to be prepared to take care of ourselves and be prepared to make it easy on the person that is going to make the decisions for us.
that's right. Yeah. When you have these things in place beforehand, it's so much easier on the family when they're not rushing around getting told no, and then they have to go and try and find an attorney, and then we have to do an emergency document preparation, and then sometimes many times at that point, we can't do anything because they're too far developed in their illness, or just not competent enough to sign documents like this, or not well enough because they're just sick and it's not even a cognitive problem. It's just they've had a stroke or something like that and they can't act for themselves. And so the only alternative to get control of somebody's medical decision making authority would be relying on Texas law. But for financial decision making authority, like entering into contracts or paying bills and making sure that part of your life is still running, is to go to court again through a process that we call guardianship. And if you're familiar with what was going on with Britney Spears with her conservatorship over
Yes.
in
Mhm.
California, that's what we call guardianship here in Texas. It is a drastic situation where you're declared to be incompetent, unable to take care of yourself. So the court takes away your own rights. It's very public because it's a court process. So everyone can see what your diagnosis is. They can see that you're not capable of taking care of yourself. Somebody else is appointed to take care of you as a guardian and make decisions for you about where you live, who your doctors are, how your money is spent, and the court controls those decisions as well. So
Yeah.
there are
So
a lot
you
of
have basically have a stranger who doesn't know you taking care of all your personal things.
well,
And
it could be your family. Like in Britney Spears' situation, it was her own father and her sister
yeah.
who were doing those things. And then, of course, the stranger was the court, but it was her own family who was requesting these things from the court and getting control of her assets and making decisions for how her money was spent and what kind of contracts she was entering
Mhm.
into and all that stuff. So it's very similar how it would work for the rest of us as well for guardianship here in Texas because a lot of times it's your family who is getting that process started and getting you declared incompetent and taking your rights away through the court and then becoming your guardian to make decisions for you. Now there are some people that don't have family members and the state does end up having to get involved and then there's an appointed guardian who works for the state. But for most guardianships, it's not necessarily your award of the state. It's your family thinks you need help and there's a doctor who agrees and then the court has to take your rights away just because you didn't have the documents in place that would give them the ability to take care of you beforehand.
Yeah. And sometimes your family members really don't know what your wishes are, you
Yeah.
know?
The documents do definitely give you the right to make your wishes known. So if there are certain things that you just don't want them to be able to do for you, you can limit those types of things. You can choose who is going to be the person who's going to be making these choices for you instead of just relying on whichever family member steps up. You get to say, no, this is the one that I actually trust to make these good decisions. And I think that they're going to make the right decision for me. And this is who want to do this for
And
me.
that's super important. And also the other thing that I like about this is you start thinking about you and your family, and you have time, hopefully, to sit down and talk to your family about it and say, well, this is what I've decided to do. This is who I've assigned as my executor. If you don't want to be the executor, let me know, and I can change my decision and have somebody else be the executor, right?
Yeah. So I do find that when you talk to your family, it does bring up some interesting conversations, things that maybe you didn't know.
Right,
Sometimes it's related to property. A lot of parents traditionally want to leave their house to their kids, and then, but their kids are older. They have children of their own at the point usually, and they have their own home. Maybe they have a home and a vacation home or a rental home that they own at
right.
this point.
Mhm.
They don't really want mom and dad's home, and so sometimes they have that conversation and they find out, oh, maybe we need to do something different with this. Or maybe one child over the other really needs it because they've had a harder time with life and really could use a place to stay after mom and dad are gone. Or it could be that, well, we thought you would be the responsible one because you're the oldest, but it turns out that you have no desire to want to be my executor or take care of me. So maybe it should be my other person who's my
We
it's
should be having those conversations with our family. That
I
way,
think that it's good. I think that it's very revealing. I think for many families, they want to avoid talking about these tough situations because it
right,
can bring a lot
right,
of feelings out.
right.
It brings a lot of scenarios up that we just don't want to think about like illness and death and leaving people behind. and a lot of emotion definitely gets brought up from it. But I think in the long run, it does help bring a kind of catharsis to the family. It's like, okay, we know what needs to be done. We know who's going to be in charge. We know that we have the tools in place that are going to get us where we need to go. And for most of my clients, when we're done with the estate planning process, when they come and visit with me, when we sign the documents, they feel like they've had a big burden lifted off of their shoulders. They feel
Yeah.
like this has been a good experience because I thought about these things that were tough and I made the choices. I had conversations with my family and kind of understood where they stood and where we stand within that image. And now we have put the tools in place to make the situation better for everybody, really.
Yeah, you feel more at peace knowing that everything's going to get taken care of, that what you wanted, hopefully, is going to get taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
We can't guarantee that everything is going to go perfect in. It's
that's
going to,
true.
like we said, no crystal ball.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at bare
You have it in
minimum,
writing, though. You have it in
yeah.
writing. So, and you have an executor who's really the director of the whole show, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you made the choice. You decided who your executor was going to be. With these kinds of things, it's also good to have alternates. So you have your primary and your secondary. So you have a list of people theoretically in there that are going to be those people that you trust, that you know are going to do a good job. And no, basically, in any number of situations, you're going to be covered with the documents. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a fairly easy process unless you have some circumstances are maybe a little bit complicated within your family, I assume.
I mean, it can be very easy. I don't think it's particularly difficult, but, it's my job, so
Yeah, yeah,
I at least for me, I try to do my best to explain things in a way that you will understand as somebody who doesn't do this for a living,
right.
and that you are going to go home feeling like you accomplished something good and that you made the decisions that were right for your family and that the documents are going to do that right thing. So I think that the difficulty that people feel about estate planning is not necessarily the actual process of doing it. It's just that psyching ourselves up kind of mentality like, oh, this is going to be terrible. I'm going to feel all these emotions. I don't want to think about death. I don't want to think
Right,
about major
exactly.
illnesses. And I just rather not do it. And so it feels worse getting into it. And then when you actually do it and you feel that weight being lifted off of your shoulders, you're like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be.
Right. You feel more at peace knowing that
Yeah.
when you die, everything will be taken care of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Monica, what is your website if people want to get to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more of the other things that you do, and how we can feel reassured?
Sure. My website is my Hennessey, HENNESSEY law.com.
Do you have a phone number?
Yeah, my number is 281-429-8102.
Well, Monica, I have so many more questions. I think it would take another hour to ask you everything that I want to ask you and learn about all these other things that you do for us. But anyway, maybe you can come back and talk to
Yeah.
us about some other things that you could get to take care of.
Oh,
But
yeah, there's so much more, definitely.
yes, yes, you have a lot. So thank you so much for coming in and educating us a little bit more about what we should do to help ourselves and help our family.
My pleasure. I just hope that this has been educational and everybody goes and gets their will done.
Yeah. And as always, I'd like to thank you also for being with me for this edition of Spotlight Houston. And if you have any comments, please let me know. And if you have any story ideas, please get in touch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gabby, your AI co host here at Spotlight Houston. Today, we delved into the essential topic of estate planning with our expert guest, Monica Hennessey. Remember, the insights shared in this episode are for education and information purposes, so please seek professional advice for your specific needs. Monica's insights today aren't a paid endorsement, but valuable knowledge to guide you. Join us next week for more inspiring Houston stories. Spotlight Houston is a production of Story Zone Media.